And welcome to today's webinar from the latest in our language learning and language teaching webinar series from Sanako. My name is Jonathan Viner. I'm one of the team here at Sanako working on these webinars and delighted to be joined by two expert speakers in today's session. So first of all, we will be hearing from David Binns, who is the Director of UK Operations. I will leave David to introduce himself as part of his presentation shortly. But given the title of the presentation, the webinar today, Language Teaching in the New Normal, Examples from Institutions in the UK, David is perfectly positioned to give a brilliantly detailed insight into how both K-12 and higher education institutions in the UK are responding to the demands of teaching in an increasingly blended and hybrid model. And he's going to share some really detailed examples and case studies from the United Kingdom. We're also delighted to be joined by Aleksis, who's a solutions specialist at Sanako. He's an expert in language teaching technologies and has over 12 years experience of working with institutions and with our customers across the globe. So Aleksis is going to give a update on product and product specifications after David has talked in a little bit of detail through his customer case studies. Just by way of housekeeping before we get underway, you will have noticed in the top left-hand corner that our webinar is being recorded. We will circulate a link to the recording to all participants, and that recording will be published on Sanako's website and social media channels. And obviously, we would be delighted if you could share that and comment on that with your networks across social media. Do please stay until the end when Aleksis will give you an opportunity to sign up for a free product trial. That will give you opportunity to test and to use the technologies that David talks about in his presentation at the beginning. Please do also note that all of our attendees will be muted by default and that you can only ask questions through the Q&A functionality. We will address questions regarding problems with microphones or with sound or with the presentations as we go through, but I would encourage you to ask questions for both David and Aleksis, which I will then feed to them and will then talk through at the end of their presentations. And obviously do be aware that your questions and those answers will be visible to everybody participating in this webinar today. Just a brief introduction to Sanako. Sanako was established in 1961, so 2021 is a significant and important year for us. Sanako is a Finnish edtech business, and its focus is solely on providing language teaching solutions within education. The company's mission is about helping teachers to teach and students to learn languages more efficiently and more effectively. And as I've mentioned, we have a network of customers globally in over 110 countries, and our variety of solutions are now being used in over 50,000 classrooms worldwide. And we're delighted, obviously, today to welcome attendees to this webinar from across the globe. So thank you for finding time in your busy days, in some cases at the beginning of the day, and in some cases at the end of the day, for joining us today. It's very much appreciated, and we hope you find today's session of value. And without further ado, I'm going to ask David to share his screen and to kick off. David, the floor is yours. And please, again, just to reiterate before David starts, please do use the Q&A facility to ask any questions and to seek any clarifications. If there's anything urgent, I'll stop David and get him to address that. But otherwise, we will take those questions at the end of David's session in 15 minutes or so. David, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Hopefully everybody can see my screen now. As Jonathan said, I'm the Director of UK Operations for Sanako. I have worked at Sanako now, well, it's 42 years on the 1st of October. In that time, as you can imagine, I have seen so many changes in the technology and methodology of the way modern languages is taught here in the UK. Sanako UK head office is based in the city of Leeds, which is pretty much in the centre of the UK, and that's purely for geographical reason, in that it's fairly easy to get to any part of the UK from our headquarters. We have been supplying various systems now for such a long time, so much so that 70% of UK universities now use Sanako technology in some way or another. As you can see here, we have a selection of universities with different styles of systems. Usually we find universities put in multiple systems rather than one. Slightly different in schools, we have Monmouth School, which is just a normal everyday state school in Wales, Epsom College, which is a fee-paying school in England, and Laswade High School, which is in Scotland. All of these customers use our advanced technology, and they have evolved with us over the years. They use combinations of Sanako Study, Sanako Connect, Pronounce, and even the headsets we use. Many people overlook headsets, but they're vital. If you want to give a good languages lesson, you need good quality audio. And one of the great things about the Sanako headsets is they have something which is called side tone built in. What this basically means is the user, the student, can hear themselves speaking. So there's no need to shout, which improves pronunciation and gives for more efficient lessons. So what was a typical installation like in the UK pre-COVID? We had our Study 1200 systems, which was by far our most popular, generally installed within a classroom. But we found that our customers wanted to do more. They didn't just want to restrict language learning to a classroom. So we installed the software on the institution file server. This basically meant that any other room with computers or laptops in could be set up for self-access work. So students could practice work they had done in the main language laboratory centre. And then, of course, COVID came along. So customers switched to Sanako Connect to do these things online. Other universities in particular had the same scenario, but they wanted to take things a little bit further and add conference interpreting modules. There's various types of this, and they break into different categories, which I will touch on a little bit later. This just means your language laboratory can be used as a language laboratory. If you had students who wanted to learn conference interpreting skills, they can do. It just gives multi-flexibility to your investment. Then, like so many countries around the world, the pandemic hit the UK, and the UK was put into lockdown. Schools were closed, businesses were closed, but the UK government insisted that teaching must continue. This was a new world for so many of our teachers and lecturers in the UK. To go online was very new, but Sanako had Sanako Connect ready, so that was great. Many institutions turned to products such as Microsoft Teams and Zoom, Google Classroom, all these platforms, which is great. However, they're generic, designed for everything. And we soon realized that for good quality language teaching online, customers needed something a little bit more dedicated, something specific to the needs of language learning, and that was Sanako Connect. So let's take a look at a few examples. This is Rugby School. Some of you may have heard of Rugby School. I believe they have 3 Study 1200 language laboratories. Rugby School was founded, it's one of the oldest schools in the country, it was founded in 1567. It's always one of the top performing schools. Has around 1,000 students, and for the sports people amongst you, it was famous for inventing the game of rugby. It's also provided 7 British Prime Ministers over the years. And they use a combination of the Study 1200 Language Centre for daily classroom use. They use Sanako Connect for online teaching, and Pronounce Live. Now, because many of the students for rugby school come from overseas, they weren't allowed to travel during the lockdown. So teaching switched basically to Sanako Connect for about a year. And this is how they did it. They had the teacher either sat in school or sat at home, logged in. All of this was to be done online, which was a new experience for many teachers. And one of the advantages we found with Connect is that, no disrespect to any languages teachers listening, but you like things to be simple to operate and use. And the feedback we've got about Sanako Connect from actual teachers is that it's simple. And that's a key thing, because if something is simple to use, then it will be used. Rugby school wanted to split their classes. They wanted to have a particular group within the session doing live synchronous learning with the teacher, which of course Sanako Connect can do. They also wanted students to be, how can I say it, perhaps jumping in and out of lessons. Sometimes they were working independently, but the teacher was there in the background to support them. And the other group was basically students working independently, remotely, with the occasional support from the teacher. This meant that the teacher could support 3 different activity groups, all running simultaneously without too much difficulty. It does save the teacher a lot of time being able to do this. They also use a product called Pronounce Live, which is, they use this online for self-access work predominantly. The teacher will upload a short phrase or text, or in text. Pronounce Live will play that back in an authentic voice. Students record their comparison, and it will give them an accuracy feedback. So they use a combination of all these products to continue their teaching. And over the pandemic, during the lockdown, teaching basically continued as normal. So let's look at a complete contrast. Monmouth Comprehensive School is a state-funded school here in the UK. That generally means they don't have a lot of money available. Founded in 1903, an average school in the UK with around 1,600 students. They use the Sanako Study 1200 as well, as you can see. They use it on wireless laptops also, which means they can walk from classroom to classroom. But of course, when the school was closed, they also switched to Sanako Connect online. They did things slightly differently in that parts of the school were still open for what we would call sixth form, which are students between the age of 17 and 18. So some students could still come into school. So they had their language laboratories for daily teaching, normal everyday teaching. As with rugby school, they set up areas of the school with just wireless laptops in where students could come and sit and practice and access work that the teacher had provided. That's such a typical photograph of the way things are in the UK today. Students working in class with a mask. It's just so typical. They also use the Pronounce Live for homework. I know the modern phrase is synchronous and asynchronous, but I'm so old to remember when exactly the same activities were called classwork and homework. Then they switched to Sanako Connect Online for the majority of the students who weren't allowed to come into school. As you can see, very similar functionality, but online just made everything a little bit easier. If we look at some universities now, Liverpool University, of course, very famous, home of the Beatles. People who are into music will know. Founded in 1881, and it has around 25,000 students. Famous alumni, as you can see here. Anybody who is a fan of the James Bond film may remember M. Stella Rimington, the ex-head of MI5, was an attendee to Liverpool University, and that's who M was based upon. Similar scenario, they used their Study 1200 language laboratories within the university. During lockdown, they simply weren't used, so they switched to Connect Online. Interestingly, they took it upon themselves to send the headsets they use within the university out to students who are working independently for good quality audio. Exactly the same scenario as with Monmouth Comprehensive School. They had some students who were allowed in, so the teacher set up self-access routines for students to practice working independently. That's just a typical photograph of a student sat working independently. They also switched to Connect Online, so lessons could continue. Something that proved very popular at Liverpool University was what's called the voice insert facility. We have lots of schools and universities now creating what we call video selfies here in the UK. I'm sure you've all seen the selfie idea, which is on YouTube and TikTok and all these things. We were finding that lecturers were taking videos of themselves asking questions, uploading them into Connect, using the voice insert so the teacher could ask a question and the student could give the answer, just to give it a little bit more of a realistic feel. University of Westminster, another one of England's oldest universities. It's a high-ranking university. Once again, famous alumni Alexander Fleming and Mick Jagger, you may have heard of him. This is one of the systems that use the conference interpreting technology as well as the languages technology. They have, I believe, I think it's 2 or 3 language laboratories which double up as interpreting suites before students graduate into the full hardware-based systems. Like with all the other universities, they use a combination of the Study 1200 Language Centre, Connect Online, and Pronounce Live. Once again, universities tended to send the headsets home for students to use remotely, just for the good quality audio. You can buy headsets very cheaply these days, but we have a saying here in the UK, you tend to get what you pay for. If you want quality, you have to pay for it. So the the University of Westminster transition model, very similar. As you can see, the language centres are used on a daily basis. They've just started using them again now as universities open up. They also use the traditional language laboratories for practice interpreting and translating skills, which is something which is very popular here in the UK. As with the others, they have the self-access facility where students can sit down and work independently. That's just one of the 2 conference interpreting suites, which are linked back to the language laboratories, so all exercises and information can be shared. And Sanako Connect, as with all the others, just allowed them to continue teaching online in the world of COVID-19. Their lessons just continued. Like with everything, when you introduce a new technology, there were a few issues to begin with, but these issues tended to be student-based, in that students may have been in McDonald's, accessing their exercises on their mobile phone while buying a hamburger. The issues that came up tended to be, how can I say this, other than common sense issues. You can use it. Sanako Connect will work with a mobile phone, but we recommend an iPad or a Chromebook or a laptop, simply because of the size of the screen. But once students have understood this, we have very few issues. University of Westminster is one of our newer universities. They went for total software solutions, which is fine. Also do interpreting. Exactly the same scenario as with Westminster. So once again, the language laboratories linked to which are used for translation and interpreting as well as languages, linked to an open access center, which in turn is also linked to Sanako Connect Online. It just gives them the full blended learning flexibility for students. And of course, here in the UK, students are fee paying. So essentially they are running a business. So they needed to continue to deliver their teaching. Since 2020, March 2020, we have found that every single Sanako customer in the UK has now switched to software-only solutions. They've become the standard, and we're finding that traditional blended learning is becoming the norm here in the UK, which is a combination of the language laboratories within school and continued learning with Sanako Connect Online. This is what they look like. They're extremely simple to use. This is the study tutor interface here, and we have the student interface. This one's in interpreting mode, which allows the voice insert, as you can see, question, answer, question, answer. In the good old days, you used to have to leave gaps for students to record their answers, but research showed that that wasn't a good way of doing things, because often students, particularly the girls here in the UK, would talk for longer and then record over the top of the next question. The boys, who tended to give shorter answers, felt because there was still space to fill where there was a blank area to complete, they would put recordings in there that weren't relevant. Voice insert just allows them to record for as long as they need before the next question starts. It's a fantastic facility. Exactly the same online with Sanako Connect. As you can see, students in the different groups, like I showed you with the rugby school, Group A working in one activity, Group B another activity, Group C, and so on. And you can have students doing different things simultaneously. Because it works in synchronous mode, if students don't finish their exercises during class time, you can leave it online for them to complete when they have time, usually on an evening. And when they've done their work, they can just simply click submit and send their completed work back to the teacher for assessment. The teacher can insert their comments into the student's recording and give them instant feedback. That's great for practicing and correcting pronunciation skills. And of course, I mentioned Pronounce Live fairly briefly. You can see how it works. Copy some text in there, the student repeats what they hear, and the system gives them an accuracy feedback. So just wanted to go on to any questions now. Have we got any, Jonathan? I can't see. Let's have a quick look.
Thanks, David. That's brilliant. As David suggests, now is the time for your questions. We have got a couple already, so thank you for those, but please do let me know, do post in the Q&A if you've got any questions for David. David, while attendees are answering or thinking of questions to ask you, a couple just from me to get things going. You've described here a variety of different tools, a variety of different technologies, whether that be kind of physical language labs or software-based solutions or online-based kind of solely online solutions. How do teachers, how do schools balance using potentially 2 or 3 different technologies to deliver their language lessons?
What's happening at the moment, the UK is currently coming out of lockdown now, so students have returned to universities and schools. But during lockdown, if we start simply pre-lockdown, schools, teachers would come in, use the study range of language centres, and perhaps use Connect just for homework, to present homework. Then when schools were in full lockdown, everything switched to Sanako Connect online. So simply because the students couldn't visit school. Now, it's very interesting actually. Now we've come out of lockdown, students have returned to schools, and we've discovered that teachers are using a balance of the two. They're using study for day-to-day teaching in classroom, yet they may have some, let's call them sixth form students, who are sitting remotely in another part of the school or university, who also want to be taught. So they're using the two together. So there's no either or, it tends to be a mixture. If I give you an example, here in the UK, one of the big problems we have here in the UK is actual physical room space. For example, the languages classes may have 4 or 5 rooms dedicated to languages. That's great in that, excuse me, in that students will come to that room, there will be a teacher there, they will give a lesson. But what if there are more students than there are classes available? Students are now going to libraries and teachers are switching on Connect in conjunction with study. So they can say to these students, just go to the library, sit down, log into Connect, and we can continue a lesson as at the same time I am giving a normal languages lesson. So okay. They're finding it's a mixture of the two. They call it blended learning here in the UK.
And David, I take your point about kind of problems, common sense solutions. I think you described them to the simple problems, but we know, don't we, that sometimes when you are introducing these different technologies and different approaches, teachers need help and support, or schools need help and support setting these systems up. Can you just, I mean, how do your team help and support schools to implement these new technologies and this new blended learning approach?
Yeah, what we do here in the UK, once again, if we break it into segments, when we were using the classroom-based study range, we have ex-teachers here in the UK who will visit site and train people on how to use the language laboratories, because training is vitally important. It's so important. We like customers to get the best from their systems, simply because, and this sounds very mercenary, in that if customers are getting the best from their systems and know how to use them, we get fewer technical support calls. It works well. When things switched to online, it was a little bit different. We do lots of training, but we now do it remotely. We also created lots of, we call them the how-to video range with Sanako Connect. They're on our webpage. They're free to use for anybody who wants to use them. And we are finding lots and lots of teachers are accessing them. No teachers will want to do every single activity every day. They tend to find 5 or 6 activities that they will focus on. A different teacher may find a different 5 or 6 activities. We offer online training constantly, but if we're not there or not available for the training, they can go to our webpage and see the videos on their particular activity. It's once again, it's a method that seems to work quite well for our customers.
Yep. Again, do post in the Q&A if you've got questions for David. A couple of questions here. Florence has asked a question about schools using the product. Will there be some talk of techniques? I mean, I guess, Florence, the webinar was billed as being examples from institutions in the UK, which is what we've delivered. But we will continue to talk about how teachers are responding to teaching in this new environment as we walk through. We don't have any other questions we do. Somebody has, okay, we are up to date with all of our questions. David, I think we will, if there are no further questions from attendees, then David, thank you very much for your presentation. That's brilliant. We will share that and share the recording, obviously, with delegates afterwards. So, Aleksis, I'm going to pass over to you now to take the stage and to take the mic.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you, David, for the great presentation. My presentation will focus on the upcoming features that we're going to have available in Sanako Connect. As a brief recap, David already covered this during his presentation, but I will quickly tell you what Sanako Connect is. Sanako Connect is a blended teaching platform that combines the best parts of virtual classroom solutions and language labs. Like David touched upon, it's designed for language educators specifically, so it's not a general use distance learning solution. It's completely designed for language learning functions, and it can be used both in the classroom and remotely. So what can you do with Sanako Connect? You can easily deliver different pedagogical approaches with various exercise types. So there's a lot of flexibility for your particular teaching style. You can do receptive and productive tasks or have your students do them either at home or in the classroom. The most important part, of course, is for the students. They also receive important self-evaluation, which is enabled by recording their speech and different exercise types. So for the new and upcoming features, first, we're going to take a look at teacher-controlled exercises. Now, this feature is already available to anyone who's using Sanako Connect. This bridges the gap between a traditional language lab and an exercise platform. This gives the teachers full control over what the students see and can interact with in Connect. The teachers are also able to enable the recording on the student end, so students can actually focus on using the target language. This feature is great for formal assessments and exams. Basically, any kind of exercise that you've created inside Connect can now be launched to students and can be fully controlled by you, the teacher. One of the upcoming features is a user interface update. It will clear things up a bit because we have been focusing on making the language learning functions as good as possible. Now is time to make everything look great. We are also going to add additional video streaming options. These come in handy in distance learning solution type scenarios. So you will be able to have video discussions with your group, and additionally in the future, you could, for example, have a model student giving a presentation to the entire class and they would be able to see them. Now, like David mentioned, some students like to use Connect on their mobile phones. So we're going to improve the mobile experience for your students as well. It's going to be a lot easier to use, and if they're in a McDonald's queuing for food, they can easily complete their exercises while they're doing that as well. David also mentioned Pronouns Live during his presentation. I will briefly explain what Pronouns Live does. The core functionality of Pronouns Live is that students practice pronunciation with it. The system provides the students with a speech model. So a text-to-speech engine reads out the phrases, and the students just repeat them, and the system automatically evaluates how well the students did when they pronounced the phrase in question. Now, this will also be integrated into Connect and will be available to you as a different exercise type. It will once again add to the flexibility that Connect offers for language teaching and learning. We are also adding interpreter training functions to Connect. There are already a host of functions that can be used. For example, the features that David highlighted where students record their answers or translations over a video or audio file, but we will be adding additional functions as well, so you can use them in your interpreter training. Final upcoming feature is we're always open for user feedback on what kind of functions you would actually like to see in Sanako Connect. So please make sure to sign up for the trial And if there's anything specific that you would like to see in the platform, please get in touch with us. We're happy to look for solutions for your problems as well. And on that trial, here is some information on how you can sign up for the trial for Sanako Connect in particular. So after the webinar, there will be communication from either from us or one of our resellers. You will receive the recording of the webinar, also information on upcoming webinars organized by us. And you can also contact your local reseller directly and register for a product trial. Thank you. That concludes my part.
Brilliant. Thank you, Aleksis. That's great. I'm just going to ask again whether anybody has any questions for Aleksis based on the updates to Connect that he's just described. While we're waiting to see whether anybody does have any questions, Aleksis, can you just describe? So you've asked people to provide their thoughts and comments and suggestions and feedback on Connect. Can you just describe the process that you use internally to then decide which ideas you proceed with or which ideas you don't proceed with? What happens to those suggestions after they've been put forward?
Well, we all obviously go through each and every suggestion thoroughly, and while we think about each suggestion, they of course have to have some global appeal as well. So it's something that most of our users would be using. That's basically the thought process behind it. Because of the technology, we're able to do almost anything that the users come up with, and many of the features that we have in Connect have come through to us from teachers who have found a specific example that they need to be implemented into Connect. And then we go through what is needed and we implement it. It's basically that simple.
Great. To the earlier question around kind of teachers' techniques, I mean, how are you finding, what feedback have you had from teachers, what feedback have you had from schools about how they are teaching differently using Connect, using online only tools as opposed to a kind of traditional physical language lab? How has that changed how teachers are teaching languages, in your opinion?
I think this is strange territory for everyone. So everyone is finding their way, sort of, how to deliver the lessons and what kind of lessons the students actually are interested in doing. That's why there's a lot of flexibility built into Connect to facilitate almost any kind of teaching and learning.
Okay, Lynette, you've just asked a question. It's a general question, but I wonder whether you could be a little more specific. If you could just type in a slightly more specific question I can put to Aleksis, that would be great. Thank you. Aleksis, one specific question we've had is around the interpreting functions. Is there any more that you can reveal at this stage about precisely what the new functionality will enable teachers and students to do?
Well, basically, we already have in study the full suite of interpreter training functions. And we're going to implement those into Connect as well. Basically, the ability to listen while the students are translating to different groups, for example. So conference interpreting training, that kind of features are coming into Connect as well.
Okay. What benefit does that bring to the teacher, and what benefit does that bring to the student? Just outline that for us.
Well, basically in study, the functionality is designed to mimic an actual conference where the participants can hear the translations in real time. And well, it just gives them real life practice in a scenario that will happen when they actually enter work life.
And can you give Yen, who asked the question, any guidance as to when these new functions will be available?
No specific dates. We're currently developing the features, so we hope to see them as soon as possible as well.
Okay. Okay, so Lynette has, thank you, Lynette, for clarifying your question. Lynette's question, I think effectively is, why do we need teachers when this platform does everything? I'm sure you've got an answer to that, because presumably the platform doesn't populate itself full of content. So perhaps you could just explain and reassure everybody on the webinar that Sanako still sees a key role for teachers in this process moving forward.
That's a very good question, and the system is actually not teaching students independently. It relies completely on the teacher to deliver the teaching. So it's a tool for teachers, not something that can actually replace teachers. Even the Pronounce Live solution, it's just a tool for your students to practice on their own. It's not meant to replace an actual teacher.
And if anybody, I don't know if you saw, Aleksis, or if anybody on this webinar saw an article in The Economist last week which echoed that the killer app in EdTech is the teacher. The killer app, the apps that are succeeding at the moment in EdTech globally are those which help and support and assist the teacher and free them up to spend more time teaching, rather than those which seek to remove the teacher entirely from this conversation. And Sanako is very much that. Aleksis, that's very much at the heart of the Sanako approach, isn't it?
Exactly. Yes, definitely. Yes, that's the key.
Lynette has answered with a smiley-faced emoji saying that's reassuring. Thank you. So, yeah, for anybody who was concerned, Sanako wouldn't have a business without teachers and with schools, I guess.
Exactly. Yes.
David, any final thoughts on that before we bring the session to a close?
Just a couple of quick things, because I am by far the oldest here, many years. I just replied, the question of the teacher, I was asked exactly the same question in the 1980s when we replaced the open reel recorder with a cassette recorder. If you think of Sanako systems as being delivery platforms being driven by the teacher, that's what they are, and that's what they will always be. Because the question, the blunt answer is, with teachers, and if I guess there's lots of experienced teachers attending this webinar, with any computer program, you cannot program for the unexpected. And with any classroom full of students, you're going to get the unexpected. That's for sure. So the teacher is a key part of everything we develop. And that's been the same since the early 1980s. Right up to today, it's not changed. So don't worry about that.
That's great to hear. Okay, one final question. Aleksis, I think this is one for you, saying, Jiang asks, I saw a slide that in Sanako Connect, students get videos of self-learning, IPA/sounds. So students just reply and just replay and replay the sounds until they can imitate. Is that correct?
Well, that's an activity type. You're doing a model imitation activity, and the source can be either the teacher or an audio file that you have available, or even a video file. But it's just another activity type that you would create in Connect.
Okay. Fantastic. Aleksis, can I just ask you just to, if there are no further questions, I think that's, I don't appear to be any in the Q&A. A last final chance for anybody who does have any questions to ask them now. But Aleksis, can I just ask you to share your presentation and the final slide of that so everybody knows, just as before we finish, how they can access the free trial and what happens next. So we will be contacting everybody who registered and attended today's session. Please do check your email inbox. Obviously, check your trash and your junk just to make sure that it hasn't been trapped in there. And we hope that you will take out the Sanako Connect trial and feed back to us with your suggestions on future product developments. And obviously, do speak to your local resellers directly to get any further information about the product and to register for the free trial. Thank you, everybody, for joining our session today. Thank you for your questions, and thank you also to David and Aleksis for talking us through their fascinating presentations this morning. So thank you, everybody, and we hope to see you again on a future Sanako webinar. Have a great day. Thank you very much indeed for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you.